Souvenir programs here, held by legends, signed by heroes. Really rings true in the case of today's player. Like others I've profiled, he's another ball player who, if the stars were aligned just right on that day, he'd be remembered as one of the all time legendary major league pitchers. But as it turned out, this player would come up just short, like some of the other players who came so close to turning themselves into a legend. He was tall, real tall, and threw hard, real hard, and by all accounts, including his own, a mean pitcher who was feared by some of the greatest batters of the era, with some even admitting it. And they said so themselves. In 1947, just about every batter that faced him said basically the same thing. You'd rather not face him right now. Sure, there were a few batters who wouldn't admit to being scared, but if these six Hall of Fame legends can say they were intimidated or would worry about facing him, then there should be no shame in admitting it. Ted Williams admitted it. So did Joe DiMaggio and Jackie Robinson. Ralph Kiner said his legs quivered. Roy Campanella said he was the toughest pitcher the Dodgers faced, and the quote from Stan Musial was, "I don't see how he ever loses a game." And when it comes to intimidating pitchers in MLB history, he ranks right up there with Walter Johnson, Bob Feller, and Randy Johnson. And like them, he too had a real cool nickname, the Whip, and was a Cincinnati Reds mainstay who would bean you and then stand there and watch as you take your base. He would always say with a grin, "Yeah, I throw it, guys. I became a mean pitcher." It could be said, and has been by many, and put into print by baseball writer Joe Falls when he wrote that this pitcher's 1947 MLB season was the most dominant in history. Joe Falls was born in New York and started working for the Associated Press in 1945, and over his lifetime wrote many baseball books and watched all the greats of the era. He was there. When comparing players, it's subjective, but statistics don't lie, and this pitcher's numbers were real in 1947. As were Bob Feller and Warren Spahn's that year. This is where it comes down to who's your favorite pitcher or team. Over the years, this MLB pitcher was the Game 5 starter in the 1952 World Series for the Yankees. He was a six-time All-Star, 6 straight seasons, and was the starter in the 1947 Classic, working 3 innings of scoreless ball with 4 strikeouts, one of those being Ted Williams. He sat down 9 of the 10 batters he faced that day. It was only Joe DiMaggio who could muster up a single. And it's not exaggerating when saying that this pitcher could be called the best pitcher of 1947. He had more wins than anybody in baseball. First in strikeouts per 9 innings pitched, second in complete games pitched, second in ERA, had 6 shutouts and a 16-game win streak going the distance in 15 of them. Besides that, he threw a no-hitter, almost 2 in back-to-back games. But with that said, do you know the difference between an immortal baseball legend who is known around the world and still talked about 80 years later, and a really good MLB pitcher many never heard of? 2 outs. Had he gotten those 2 outs, the name Ewell Blackwell would be known by all who follow the game as a MLB pitching legend. So let's go. Ewell Blackwell, nickname Blackie, aka the Whip. He was 6'6", lanky and lean at 195 pounds, a righty pitcher. Another player with no middle name. It figures since he's tall and skinny, that's probably why they called him the Whip. No, it's because of Ewell's wicked sidearm delivery that came with a snap, and some say when delivered looked like he was falling out of a tree. Others said his right arm looked like it was coming from third base, or that he looked like an octopus when winding up and then delivering. These are somewhat accurate descriptions of Ewell's delivery. Hal Newhouser said he's the only pitcher that hides the ball 4 times and shows you the ball 4 times. Ewell Blackwell was born in Fresno, California in 1922. When he started Bonita High School, he was a small, skinny kid who was only 5'5". 2 years later, he was 6'3" and liked to play basketball more than baseball. But when you're good at a certain sport, they convince you to stick with it. Ewell's dad, Flugen, built a wooden box with a strike zone in the backyard for his son to practice, and the still growing teenager got himself a scholarship to Laverne Teachers College in Los Angeles. He attended one semester and left school to become a riveter at the Volti aircraft plant, pitching for the company team, and that's when scouts took notice. So, it's 1942. Ewell and his dad wanted the quick path to the majors, not concerned with a big signing bonus. Instead, the Blackwells asked for an invite to a big league spring training camp. I also read where they demanded one. But baseball is very rigid and controlling with lots of agreements and unwritten rules, some not talked about in public and made in back rooms. Even just asking for an invite to a spring training camp was frowned upon. The Dodgers said no. Cardinals GM Branch Rickey also said no, as did every other team in the majors, except for one. Cincinnati Reds scout Pat Patterson said, "Okay, come on out." Ewell and his father got what they wanted, plus a contract and a bonus of $750. When the Reds saw Ewell at training camp, manager Bill McKechnie told Reds GM Warren Giles, "Boss, you've got a natural," and later told the assembled writers that the youngster would be one of the all-time greats. And when it comes to taking a unique route to the big leagues, Ewell Blackwell took it, the direct route. His first game as a professional baseball player was not in the minors, but the majors. Very rare. What's that, Ed? How rare? I'll just go with the first stat I found. Not the era I was looking for, but you'll get the idea. Since 1965, only 23 players went straight to the majors. That rare. Almost all start in the minor leagues. Not too many start their first season in the majors. Al Kaline was one. Bob Feller was another. And like Bob Feller, Ewell was a teenage pitcher when he stepped up on an MLB pitching mound, making his MLB debut April 21st, 1942. And the Reds saw what they wanted and liked it, and sent the youngster to the Syracuse Chiefs, their Double-A club, to work on his pitches. His pitches? They didn't need much work. Ewell was an instant star in the International League, ending his first season of pro ball with a record of 15-10, a 2.02 ERA with 4 shutouts, and would pitch 3 more shutouts in the International League playoffs, missing out on the Junior World Series with pneumonia. Besides having pneumonia, that sounds like the start to a promising career. But remember what year it is. It's 1942. And there's a world war going on, which means there's a good chance you'll be in it. And he was in it. And like most who served in World War II, he was in it for 3 years. But before going overseas, the teenager was offered to play for the Syracuse Nationals of the National Basketball League. Maybe Ewell told the Reds how much he liked playing basketball, because they paid him $3,000 not to. The teenager was drafted into the 71st Army Infantry, January of 1943. But at 6'6", you stand out when in military formation, so the tall and the small are made cooks or cleaners. He was made a cook, and the guy everybody called Blackie said, "I never boiled an egg in my life and could hardly make a glass of lemonade." When he got back from Germany after the war, fortunately for Ewell, he was still 6'6" and not 6 feet under, saying he never got used to the sound of the German 88s going off and would jump every time. The soldier/cook was back in time for the start of the 1946 season and picked up where he left off with the Reds organization. But now, instead of a teenager, Ewell Blackwell is an ex-soldier and a certified Army cook. The 23-year-old rookie was everything manager McKechnie had hoped for. Ewell Blackwell had a signature overpowering fastball, 2 types of curves, hard and soft. His 2 .45 ERA was fourth best in the NL for 1946. His 5 shutouts were the most in the league, and the guy they now called the Whip allowed only 1 home run in 194 innings and would pitch in the first of his 6 consecutive All-Star games, the first National Leaguer to do so. So what comes next for the 6'6" Army cook? After 1946 comes 1947. It was on a Friday, July 25th, 1947. Cincinnati's Crossley Field was packed with over 24,000 spectators as the Reds hosted the Philadelphia Phillies. Why were there so many fans there to watch a team that's in 6th place play a team that's in last place? The Reds had the lowest attendance in the National League, and the previous day's game only had 13,000 Reds fans showing up for what would have been a better contest against the pennant-leading Brooklyn Dodgers. And the Dodgers had a novelty in their lineup in that game, a rookie from California named Jackie Robinson, who was making waves and history in MLB, something the fans never saw in a major league game before, a black player. So why was there twice as many Reds fans at this Phillies game? Because on this day, one of the best pitchers in the country, Cincinnati Reds' Ewell Blackwell, the Whip, he was on the mound and had been overwhelming and dominating batters all season, going into this game with a record of 17-2, soon to be 18-2. And the Whip is riding a 15-game win streak and starting to close in on Rube Marquard's National League single-season record of 19, and also trying to break Dazzy Vance's modern record for most consecutive wins by a National League righty. That's why there were so many straight-up baseball fans in attendance, because in the summer of 1947, nothing beats going to the ballpark with your dad to see Phillies' Harry the Hat Walker, one of the heroes in the 1946 World Series and soon-to-be batting champ, square off against the hottest and meanest pitcher in baseball, Ewell Blackwell. And on this Ohio summer day, 24,000 plus fans got to see both. So how did one of the best hitters in Major League Baseball do against one of the best pitchers? I don't know. I guess I could have looked that up. Harry the Hat had 5 at-bats and only got 1 single. Ewell the Whip Blackwell had 9 strikeouts in the win. The end of Ewell's win streak was a total heartbreaker a few days later on July 30th when he carried a 4-3 lead into the 9th inning against New York Giants. He tried to brush back Willard Marshall but left the ball over the plate and it was smashed for a home run to tie the game. In the 10th, with the Whip still on the mound, Giants have a man on second, and all the Whip needs is 1 out to keep his win streak going. He has 2 strikes on Buddy Kerr when the Whip throws a curveball that he thought cut the middle of the plate belt high, but that's not what the ump thought and called it a ball. On the very next pitch, Buddy Kerr hits an RBI single to win the game, ending the win streak at 16 for Ewell Blackwell. His teammates probably felt bad for the gangly California pitcher, but were also happy because this meant Blackie would finally wash his lucky jersey he wore since he started his win streak. Ewell refused to wash the good luck out of his flannel, and on days he pitched, most likely sat by himself in the dugout. Ewell's parents flew out to the east to see their boy pitch for the first time in the big leagues, and when the game ended in a loss for their son, his mom sat in the stands crying. A month later, after his 20th victory, Ewell set a goal for himself to win 25 games. Goals are important, but he would not reach his goal. He was slid into at home plate by Dodgers' Pete Razor, forcing the Whip to miss 2 starts, finishing the season 22-8, and accounted for 1/3 of the wins by the 5th place Reds. Blackie led the league in victories, second in strikeouts, second in complete games with 23, second in shutouts, second in ERA, and second in the MVP voting behind Boston Braves' Bob Elliott. Here's 2 more stats that show just how great his 1947 was. He was the only pitcher to strike out twice as many as he walked, and his 6.4 strikeouts per 9 innings was nearly double the National League average. When MLB players were asked in a 1947 poll who's the toughest pitcher to face in the bigs right now, it was Ewell, the Whip Blackwell's name that came up more times than Spawn or Feller. But it was on a cold day in the spring of 1948 at an exhibition game when the Whip felt a stabbing pain in his shoulder, saying, I'd wind up and begin to deliver, and halfway through my delivery, it would feel like somebody's sinking his teeth into my shoulder. 25-year-old couldn't raise his arm above his head. In 1949, Ewell had an infected right kidney that the doctors had to remove, with one doctor saying his career was over. The surgery would cut through major muscles, the ones a pitcher needs when winding up to whip the ball with full force needed to hurl a ball 100 miles an hour, or to hurl any pitch, really. He weighed only 170 pounds when spring training camp started, 20 pounds light, and at one point the string bean would have another body part removed when he had an appendectomy performed. So for the next 2 years, Blackie worked his way back into his former self, and in 1950 led the league in strikeouts per 9 innings, and second in strikeouts, second in ERA, and the extra lean pitcher and former Army cook who unfortunately lost weight through surgery and not from an Army diet of hard-boiled eggs, would lead the league in wild pitches and second in hit batters. There weren't many guys digging in on the Whip. He might be missing body parts, but he was still 6'6" and still a mean pitcher from Fresno, California. The doctors didn't change that. Nor did they remove the Whip's intimidating manner. For instance, in one 1951 game, Ewell had 2 strikes on All-Star Bob Dillinger, who had just come over to the Pirates from the American League and had never faced the Whip before. Bob Dillinger turned to umpire Al Barlick and said, Al, you can call me out anytime you want. I don't want any more of this guy. Is that true? Well, Bob said it. The ump heard it. Red's catcher was either Johnny Promesa or Dixie Howell. They would have heard it. And all this would have happened while Ewell stood up there and watched. That's pretty much the definition of intimidating. A batter so scared of getting hit by the ball and maybe killed that he put his pride aside and made a joke about it. A big change happened when Ewell was traded to the New York Yankees in the heat of the 1952 pennant race and was picked to start Game 5 of the World Series by manager Casey Stengel. And that's after his less than stellar pitching record that season, going 4-12, which goes to show how baseball is a sentimental sport, in my opinion, with lots of leeway on decision-making by each team. Ewell would start 4 games for the Yankees in 1953 before shoulder issues flared up and would leave the Yanks mid-season. The club invited him to their spring training camp in 1954 without a contract, but he couldn't pitch, and at the age of 31 said, I have pain all the way up from my elbow to my shoulder. Feeling better in the spring of 55, the Whip attempted a comeback with the Kansas City Athletics, but before too long was sent down to the Pacific Coast League, first with the Seattle Rainiers, then the San Francisco Seals, starting 16 games between the two teams, but mostly with the Seals. And he is listed in a few of Dad's scorebooks, including the ones that are autographed by the 55 Rainiers. I'll show those next week. Ewell signed both of those as a member of the Seals, and his autograph is the only Seals autograph on those covers. The rest are all Rainiers champion players. Ewell was talking with his ex-Seattle teammates both times, I guess, when Dad got his signature. Same deal as when Dad picked up Larry Doby's autograph in 1958 at spring training camp when Larry was an Oreo, and he was over there hanging out with his ex-Cleveland teammates. Seems like Dad was at the right place at the right time. Ewell Blackwell, the Cincinnati Reds all-star pitcher who would become known as the Whip, a.k.a. Blackie, known by his friends, was the 8th player to be inducted into the Reds Hall of Fame. He beat a lot of teams and intimidated a lot of batters during his time on the mound, but he would lose the final game, just like we all will. Ewell Blackwell's loss was to cancer in 1996 at the age of 74. Some things in life cannot be intimidated. Heart attacks and the big C are just too that seem to come up a lot on this show. Speaking of Ted Williams, since he was mentioned earlier in the show, Ewell Blackwell played against Ted Williams in a high school tournament, and later the two California boys would play in an exhibition game. After the game, they were talking shop when Ewell asked Teddy Ballgame how his stuff looked. Ted Williams, being the cool cat he was, went ahead and told the other California boy that he was tipping his change up. Sometime later, the two would face each other in the 1947 All-Star Game, and the whip struck him out with Teddy Ballgame looking. And the pitch he threw to the splendid Splinter, you guessed it, a changeup that Ewell Blackwell did not tip off thanks to his talk with Ted. Ted Williams turned to the ump and said the pitch was low, and for years after that, he would always maintain that it was a ball. Ewell Blackwell is like a few players I've profiled since I started this segment who were so close to making MLB history. Ewell Blackwell was 2 outs away from tying one of those even 80 years ago thought to be an unbreakable record, and that was back when pitchers were throwing complete games all the time. In the past 5 years, there's only been 30 that were thrown. Nowadays, it's 21st century baseball. Pitchers no longer throw complete games. So here we go with my trademark pending on this day. Today, June 18th, back in 1947, Ewell Blackwell was a Cincinnati Reds starting pitcher facing the visiting Boston Braves, who scored 36 runs in the 3 previous games. The whip held them hitless. Now it's the 9th inning with 2 away. Walking up to the plate was Bama Rowell, who Ewell played against while in the Army, and Bama Rowell was the final batter Ewell struck out to complete his Army no-hitter. The odds of this same exact situation occurring are incredible. The odds of the outcome are 50-50. The pitcher who skipped the minors and went straight to the majors, making an immediate impact while in the process picking up a great nickname? Yeah, if I was a betting man, I'd put my money on the whip, and I would have won. Because he struck Bama out just like he did in the Army, but this time it was a big league no-hitter, making Ewell Blackwell one of the few pitchers to throw an MLB no-hitter. You think he'd be mobbed by his teammates? Not on this day. The guy they call Blackie hadn't washed his jersey since his win streak started. So smelling like a heathen, and with nobody wanting to be around him, he would somewhat celebrate by himself and the few brave enough to be near him. Ewell did a post-game radio interview, and in that interview, he was feeling a bit brash and went ahead and predicted another no-hitter his next time out, which was a few days later on June 22nd, facing the Brooklyn Dodgers, and the whip would amazingly also hold the boys in blue hitless going into the 9th. Ewell's teammate, Johnny Vandermeer, is the only player ever to pitch consecutive MLB no-hitters, and it was Johnny who was on the top step of the dugout wanting to be the first to shake Ewell's hand. But that handshake at the end of the game would be for Blackie winning the game, not for matching Johnny's MLB record from 1938. Because after getting out the first batter, Dodgers' Eddie Stanky would make that handshake have a different meaning when he hit a grounder right back at the 6'6" pitcher that skipped between his legs and rolled into the outfield grass. Ewell Blackwell said, "I must have replayed that moment 1,000 times. It was awful tough to be so close and lose it that way." He sat down the next batter, which brought up Jackie Robinson. Before even one pitch was hurled at Jackie, he was on the receiving end of insults hurled at him as he approached the plate, just like the previous batter. The whip was pissed. He blew his back-to-back no-hitter and his chance to be a legend. Ironically, the insults towards Jackie were coming from a guy they call Blackie. Jackie shut him up when he hit a single. Ewell would get the win, but didn't tie Johnny Vandermeer's record of back-to-back MLB no-hitters. The whip only needed 2 outs. Close, but no cigar, and he would have to relive that ball going between his legs for the rest of his life. So it goes. Instead of having his name side by side next to his teammate in the MLB record book, Ewell Blackwell is another Major League All-Star that had a really nice Major League pitching career with one season that was great, and he was only 2 outs away from having one of the best seasons ever and turning himself into a legend. Had he gotten those last 2 outs, he would be.